Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is again a privilege to be able to speak in this honorable place on behalf of the good, wonderful, exceptional people in East Grand Bahama, and to make my contribution to the resolution with respect to the fiscal strategy report. Madam Speaker, the Davis tax and spend policy will destroy. Oh, sorry. I'll rewind and start again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Mr. Deputy. The Davis tax and spend policy will destroy the middle class. The PLP government's revenue projections make it clear that they intend to squeeze every dime possible from the middle class. They fully expect you, the poor, the middle class, to pay more in VAT, to pay more in real property tax, to pay more in fees, and more in customs duty. Mr. Deputy, to the tune of over $1 billion more. The Davis tax and so they can spend policy plans to make life even more expensive and even more difficult for the Bahamian middle class. You are seeking to force, and I use the word force, the middle class to sacrifice while not being prepared to do the same. But, Mr. Deputy, Gowan Bowe, who is a member of the Fiscal Responsibility Council, said in a Tribune article, and I quote, "Stop seeking to extract blood from a stone," when he was referring to this fiscal strategy report. The government is seeking to get more from those who have less. And you are destroying, in the process, you are destroying the middle class Bahamian. With no new revenue streams and no spending controls or cuts, the Davis tax so they can spend policy is seeking to extract every dollar, every dime that it can from those who have little to pay. The fiscal strategy lacks innovation and is a classic example of a tax and spend more policy. The Davis tax and spend policy makes no attempt to reduce spending and no attempt to tap into new innovative streams of revenue sources. The Davis tax so they can spend policy does not focus enough attention on job creation, and it does not focus enough attention on growing the economy. Bahamians are already faced with rising electricity costs. They are already faced with high food prices, high medication costs, higher import costs, and high inflation pressures, all due to the bad decisions of the Davis administration. And now, due to the actions of this government, they are threatened with higher health care costs. Madam Speaker, my constituents and Bahamians all across the Bahamas are calling on the government to not increase health care costs with their change in the interpretation of the VAT Act. The changes will be harmful to the consumer. If you are truly concerned about the poor and the middle class, you will not add additional costs on health care. Your actions will increase the costs for medication. Your actions will increase the cost for things like physiotherapy. It will increase the cost for medical procedures. The fear and concern is that people will also be driven to the public healthcare system, which is overcrowded already. Or they will go to the US, or they will simply not have the care that they need. Mr. Deputy, the government must fix this. First, we should clear up a few matters. The Prime Minister continues to push this untruth that he met an economy in shambles, when the truth of the matter is that the PLP met an economy well on its way to recovery. The Free National Movement oversaw most of 2021, which forecasted GDP growth at 2%. In fact, the estimate was beaten by 11%, and in 2021 settled economic growth at 13.6%. The Prime Minister claims that this report was late due to the S&P evaluation. Well, if you said this in November, or if you said this in December, or even if you said this in January, maybe we could believe what you said. But if you come in February, Mr. Deputy, it simply sounds like a made-up excuse. Something seems, to quote one of our fallen brothers, something seems a bit smudgy with this explanation. The S&P report was issued in November, and it is now 2 months later. Part of issuing these reports on time is about credibility. It is about obeying the law. It is about saying, performing what the law says you ought to perform. But, Mr. Deputy, one thing is clear. The government has not listened to the S&P evaluation at all. I quote the S&P report. The rapid increase in debt over the past few years means that the Bahamas' previous fiscal consolidation plans will likely be insufficient to meet the country's debt targets without material new revenues and significant cost cutting or economic growth well above historic averages. They go on to say, however, we believe the government's goal will be hard to achieve absent new taxes or material spending cuts. This is the same S&P report that they waited on. Having seen this evaluation, what does the Davis administration do? They say, let's increase the revenue projections, and let's increase our spending projections. Let's squeeze some more from the middle class so that we can spend even more. So having gotten the advice that your original revenue projections are too high and are not achievable, they decide, let's not listen to what was said, but let's increase the revenue projections and make them even more unbelievable. In Moody's report, which came out 1 month before the S&P, they also said Moody's needed to see, and I quote, the government's implementation of a fiscal and economic policy that support fiscal consolidation process and place the government's debt on a more durable downward trajectory. In other words, we want to see the debt come down. We want to see the spending cuts. We want to see the management of your spending. We believe that it was the government's failure to control and contain spending and its failure to meet its own fiscal targets that put us on a path to downgrade. Mr. Deputy, the biggest problem with this fiscal strategy report is that it is difficult to believe. This government has a credibility problem. The first fiscal strategy, and I remind them, which was 1 year ago, is again not consistent with this year's fiscal strategy report. You come to office and you promise in the first fiscal strategy that you will cut spending. You made significant spending cuts in your first fiscal strategy. But in less than 6 months, you bring a budget that says something different and brings different targets and adds more spending. Now, 6 months later, you bring a new fiscal strategy. And guess what? It has different targets and it has more spending. There is no consistency in your plan, and when we return in 6 months, I am sure that we will see a completely new target and even more spending. Mr. Deputy, the government unfortunately has stifled the Fiscal Responsibility Council. The government has failed to table its report, which is now a year late.
Say that again?
A year late. They have not reported on the last fiscal strategy of 2021, and the government has not tabled their report on the budget of 2022-2023, and that is 6 months late. Gowan Bowe, a member of the council, has explained that the council got access to the information required only in the summer of 2022. But he cannot say when the reports will be completed. We hasten to point out that no council member should be put in this position. The Prime Minister, as Minister of Finance, has the responsibility of ensuring that the council has immediate access to the necessary information and all resources and assistance required to meet its statutory obligation on time. We must also point out our dismay in having to learn deep in a Tribune article that the previously appointed chairman, Mr. Kevin Burrows, is no longer the council chairman. It is astounding that we would have to hear this important announcement or this important fact about an important independent statutory body, that we would hear it from a newspaper. Yet, the government makes no formal announcement on this matter. What is the status of the council, Mr. Deputy? Is there a new and interim chairman? And are there any other changes to the composition of this important council? The council functions as an independent watchdog. And that's why it is so important as we debate the fiscal strategy. Because the council serves as an important watchdog, and their report is not just sent to the government, but their report is sent to Parliament. So they must report to Parliament. So all of us as parliamentarians should be concerned when the Fiscal Responsibility Council has not reported for a year and is 6 months late on the budget report. Madam or Mr. Deputy, I have to ask the question. What is the government afraid of? Are you frightened or concerned with what the Fiscal Council will say? The government continues to have a credibility problem when they do not follow their own laws. Yes, the Bahamas is a country of laws, but it seems as though it is only this when it suits the government. You are consistently late with the legally mandated reports with no excuse. You have not followed the Procurement Act, in some cases completely ignored the provisions. You have misled Parliament and the public and simply failed the public, causing electricity costs to increase on the backs of Bahamians. Worse, you have now dragged the central bank into this. The Bahamian people have yet to receive a satisfactory answer on why you circumvented the law and accessed the country's external reserves through an advance in the SDRs held by the central bank. The Central Bank Act in Section 17 unequivocally states that the IMF's SDRs are a part of the official external reserves of the central bank. They are not, never have been the property of the central government, and for reasons that are well known and well understood. Contrary to the Ministry of Finance's press statement in January 4, 2023, the government is in fact borrowing assets from the central bank, and are both the Ministry of Finance and the central bank have noted that they are required to pay interest and to repay these funds. Mr. Deputy, the ministry is misleading the public when it says that it is not borrowing funds from the central bank. We repeat, however, that it is clearly and patently against the law for the government to get any advance of funds from the central bank except for a capped amount of a very short-term lending. Again, the government has a credibility problem. Section 21 of the Central Bank Act is explicitly clear. If the government wants to take the step and become the first government to tap into the country's foreign reserves to finance its ongoing obligation, it has to come to Parliament and explain what changed in its fiscal plan to make this necessary. Yes. The governor of central bank confirms that the change in law is required, and the financial secretary has confirmed that the advance has already taken place. Mr. Deputy, I live in Grand Bahama. I've lived in Grand Bahama my entire life and represent the good people of East Grand Bahama. Grand Bahamians continue to remain dissatisfied, disappointed, and disillusioned by the PLP government's performance. Really? We all had hoped for the hotel deal. And previously, we had updates. The board would give reports as to what's happening. The Minister for Tourism would give reports as to what's happening. The Minister for Grand Bahama would give reports as to what's happening. Now, we only hear silence. As they say, you only hear crickets. So we ask, Mr. Deputy, can the government provide an update on the sale and redevelopment of the Grand Ukiah? We hear rumors of the airport in Grand Bahama, but we have not received any official word on what's happening with the airport deal. So, Mr. Deputy, can the government report to the people and give an account as to what is the status of the airport redevelopment project? Also, Mr. Deputy, what's happening with the RCCL cruise port deal? What's happening with the solar grid project that was slated for East Grand Bahama? What is the status on the shipyard expansion? All of these, unfortunately, we are not hearing sufficient information on what's happening with these projects. These projects, some of which were started by the Free National Movement. Can the government provide the public, and in particular the people of Grand Bahama, and in particular the people of East Grand Bahama, with an update on the sale of the Equinor oil storage facility in East Grand Bahama? Mr. Deputy, I raised this issue months ago in this place. It is vitally important that the government not allow Equinor to leave without ensuring that there are sufficient funds and resources in place to compensate residents and compensate businesses for any damages left or any damages that have been done and have not been cleaned up. The Environmental Act ensures that the government has the power to ensure this does not happen. They have the power to ensure that it does not happen. So, Mr. Deputy, we ask the question, what is being done to ensure that there are resources in place that will not allow Equinor to leave without paying those resources? While the government has leverage before the sale is complete, the government must ensure that there are sufficient resources that remain to compensate and complete any cleanup that is necessary. Environmentalists have continued to express their serious concerns. Mr. Deputy, also the DRA, we had so much high hopes for the DRA in progressing with their home repair program. It is unfortunate that this home repair program has unfortunately failed the people of Grand Bahama. Mr. Deputy, also, I must ask, the Chamber of Commerce in Grand Bahama made a public call to meet with the Prime Minister. Has this meeting taken place? And if the meeting has not taken place, why is the Prime Minister not meeting with the Chamber of Commerce in Grand Bahama? And when will he meet with the Chamber in Grand Bahama? Mr. Deputy, recently the topic of Grand Bahama Port Authority also has been raised in the media. Clearly, we need a change in the Grand Bahama Port Authority. It has always been my view that the Grand Bahama Port Authority structure has outlasted the times. We need a GBPA that is accountable to the people of Grand Bahama and not just their shareholders. We need a GBPA that can and will provide a new vision for the island. We also need a GBPA that can provide the necessary resources that the island needs for redevelopment. We also need more land available for redevelopment in Freeport that businesses and Grand Bahamians can take advantage of. We also need more responsibility and power and ownership in the hands of Grand Bahamians, backed by an international partner with the resources to make this happen. Mr. Deputy, in conclusion, and I agree with the member for Elizabeth, to this extent. A large degree of the Bahamian public could almost care less about the numbers in this fiscal strategy. What they do care about is how much more expense their families face. What they do care about is how much more they will have to pay for electricity costs. What they do care about is every time they go to the food store and the food prices remain high and there's no relief in sight. Those are the things that they care about. They care about when they go to the doctor, that their medication and their medical bill is not higher than it was before. That's what they care about. They care about being able to feed their children, to pay their bills, and to live a comfortable and safe life. They care about crime. They care about the fear of crime. And that is, again, one thing that was lacking in the fiscal strategy. Because all of it is connected. What additional resources are going to be placed for the police? What additional resources are going to be placed for the immigration? What additional resources are going to be placed on education, on social services? All of these are what affects Bahamians. And they are the things that are important to the everyday Bahamian. So, Mr. Deputy, unfortunately, whatever this book says, Bahamians' lives is not better than before. Bahamians are paying more than before. And if anything, what the projections in this book says is that you could look forward to paying even more in the next few years. And so, Mr. Deputy, we call upon the government, we call upon this government to fix the problems that the everyday Bahamian is facing. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Go.
I didn't want to stop the good member from East Grand Bahama at the beginning of his speech, but I've said this before in this place, and we must be cautious with how we make statements that would seek to grab the headlines and the attention of the papers. The good member started with a statement that the financial report and the fiscal strategy report, that the plan will destroy, in his word, the middle class, destroy the middle class in the Bahamas. These heavy predictions, I want to bring light that they're not only reckless, but once they grab the headlines, internationally, they can do damage. So I draw attention to the same member's statement that is in a headline. Thompson says the proposed reduction in VAT will destabilize the economy. I don't have to give you a headline. You gave yourself a headline. The opposition's plan would lead to a dramatic and fall off in revenue, likely in excess of $100 million in a period of 12 months. Now, you want to interrupt because this is his statements. I'm quoting his statements. And I want to caution.
Yeah. Honorable members, let him finish. Let him finish.
Thank you.
Yeah, let him finish East Grand Bahama.
I know you would be disturbed by it. I know you would be disturbed.
Honorable members, East Grand Bahama, yes, I heard you. I heard you. You have the floor. I will give you a chance to answer. Yeah, I will give you a chance to answer.
This is not very long ago. These bold predictions that he claimed to have as an expert on finance is reckless, and he has been on record incorrect, grossly mistaken, and misleading. And again, he comes with this, and I am cautioning the good member, through you, Mr. Speaker, to refrain because your words have consequence. And it will come back down to you, and we will table this for the...
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Deputy, I wish to thank the member for Yamaka. I wish to really thank him because he has repeated in this place the headline that was in the paper. So I wish to thank him for actually giving more attention for the statements that I make. And I also ask him that if he's going to quote from me, that he also has to adopt my words. So, my brother, if you're going to adopt the member for Yamakura, if you're going to adopt my words, then that is a wonderful thing that you support what East Grand Bahama is saying.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for West